Audiobooks and beyond.
The Accident, narrated by Clint Murtaugh. The smell of pancakes filled the house, a sweet, comforting scent that was as much a part of Saturday morning as the sun streaming through the windows. Mark flipped another one, perfectly golden, while his wife, Sarah, poured juice for their two kids, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Leo. They ate at the kitchen table, the air thick with the usual Saturday morning chatter. Complaints about having to wake up early, plans for what they wanted to do after soccer practice, and the inevitable bickering over who got the last piece of bacon. After breakfast, the kids raced to the living room, flipping on the television. The familiar intro to their favorite cartoon filled the speakers, a silly jingle that played in the background while Mark and Sarah cleaned up the kitchen. As the last pancake was put away, the cartoon ended, replaced by the local news. Mark glanced at the screen as the anchors, a man with a perfectly coiffed haircut and a woman with a bright smile, began their broadcast. "And we have breaking news this morning," the woman said, her smile fading into a look of concern. "Reports are coming in of a major accident on the I-5 just north of the city. A big rig has reportedly overturned, and the contents of the truck have spilled across all lanes." The man cut in, "We're hearing the cleanup will be extensive. For those of you headed that way, please find an alternate route. We'll bring you more information as it comes in." Mark shook his head, a wry smile on his face. "Well, I guess we're skipping soccer practice this morning," he said to Sarah. "That's right by the fields." Lily and Leo immediately groaned in protest, but a moment later the remote was snatched and another cartoon was on. The crisis was averted, at least for the kids. Mark and Sarah settled onto the couch, enjoying the quiet hum of the house and the silly cartoon on the screen. The morning passed in a blur of cartoons, half-read books, and coffee refills. Every so often the television would be interrupted with a news bulletin. The anchors, their faces growing more concerned, reported that the situation on the freeway was more serious than initially thought. They still stressed that no one was seriously hurt, but the cleanup was proving difficult due to the unknown nature of the chemical spill. "Unknown nature?" Sarah muttered, her brow furrowed. "That sounds bad." Mark nodded, his own sense of unease growing. He tried to distract himself from the situation by setting up a game with the kids. "Okay, everyone, let's all play a board game. Leo, you're the youngest, so you get to go first," he said with an upbeat tone. It was an old favorite, a slightly battered box that had seen countless battles of strategy and luck. They set it up on the coffee table, their little brows furrowed in concentration as they moved their pieces around the colorful board. Mark and Sarah watched them, a sense of peace settling over the room. Then, the broadcast on the TV, which was just background noise at this point, took a sharp turn. The news anchor's voice became urgent, his tone laced with a sense of genuine fear. "We are now declaring a state of emergency for the surrounding area," he declared, the words slicing through the joyful game being played. In a serious and urgent tone, the anchor continued, "The chemicals from the spill are causing an unknown reaction with the air, and early reports are suggesting a high level of toxicity. We are now being advised to tell everyone in the area to close all windows and doors and to remain inside. Do not under any circumstances go outside or breathe the air. We repeat, stay inside your homes." Mark grabbed his phone, his fingers fumbling as he typed in a search query. His screen was immediately flooded with articles, all of them echoing the same message. "Urgent. Chemical spill toxicity. Stay indoors. Do not breathe the air." A cold knot of fear tightened in his stomach. He looked at Sarah, her face pale, and then at his children, oblivious to the terror unfolding on the television screen. "Kids, let's turn this off for a bit," Mark said, his voice trying to sound calm, but a tremor betrayed his fear. He hit the power button on the remote, and the screen went black. The next few hours were a blur of nervous energy. The family sealed every window, stuffed towels under the doors, and tried to act as normal as possible. But the tension was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket that settled over the house. Lily and Leo, sensing the change in their parents, became quiet and withdrawn. They watched a movie, but their eyes kept darting toward the windows. Mark glanced out the living room window, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw their neighbor, Mr. Henderson, walking his dog. Mark banged on the window, yelling, "Mr. Henderson, get inside! The air is bad!" Mr. Henderson looked up, his face a mask of confusion. He staggered a step, then another, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. His dog barked frantically at his feet. A moment later, he simply fell to the ground, motionless. His dog whimpered and nudged at his hand. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Another neighbor, Mrs. Davison, was walking her twin grandchildren down the street. Mark and Sarah began to yell, pounding on the windows and waving their arms, but it was too late. The twins suddenly stopped, looking at each other with blank, vacant expressions. They fell, followed by their grandmother. A faint, high-pitched buzzing sound began to fill the air. It was barely audible at first, a distant, persistent hum that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Mark's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his friend, Dave, who lived 2 streets over. "Dude, you seeing this? Henderson just went down. What is happening?" Another text came in from a neighbor on the other side of the street. "Are you guys inside? I just saw the Davisons fall. I'm freaking out." The faint buzzing grew louder, and Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He looked out the window again, watching the motionless bodies on the street. The next day was a study in profound, terrified stillness. The cheerful Sunday morning sun was now a malevolent glare, illuminating the unnerving tableau outside. Mr. Henderson and the Davisons remained on the ground, unmoving, their forms a silent testament to the danger that lurked beyond the glass. The family moved like ghosts through the house, their voices hushed, their movements cautious. The only sounds were the soft padding of their feet on the floor and the faint, persistent buzzing that now seemed to be a permanent fixture in the air. Lily and Leo, no longer distracted by cartoons or board games, huddled together on the couch, their eyes wide with a fear that they were too young to fully comprehend. Sarah tried to console them, but her reassurances felt hollow even to her. Every time she looked out the window, a fresh wave of panic would wash over her. Mark, meanwhile, was obsessed with his phone and the television. He scoured the internet for any new information, but the news was always the same. More reports of people collapsing, more warnings to stay inside. He found a live stream from a local news station, a shaky phone camera pointed at the freeway. He watched, horrified, as a cleanup crew in full hazmat suits approached the overturned truck. They worked for a few minutes, their movements slow and deliberate, and then, one by one, they staggered and fell. Mark gasped, dropping his phone. It was happening everywhere. The buzzing, he realized, had grown louder when they fell. He couldn't shake the thought that the two were connected. Days passed, blurring into a monotonous cycle of fear and uncertainty. Mark and Sarah spent their time glued to the television and their phones. The news broadcasts were a constant stream of updates, each one more terrifying than the last. The anchors reported that the toxic air was spreading, causing similar incidents in nearby towns. They were told to remain calm and to continue to shelter in place. Online, the stories were even more harrowing. Conspiracy theories ran rampant, everything from a chemical weapon test gone wrong to an alien attack. Mark read them all, his mind racing, trying to make sense of the senseless. They saw more people in full hazmat suits enter their neighborhood, their presence a source of hope that was quickly dashed. They watched from their windows as the hazmat teams began to perform some kind of test or analysis. But then, one by one, they would simply collapse to the ground. The buzzing sound, a constant low thrum in the air, seemed to get louder every time someone fell. Days turned into a week, and the family's food supply began to dwindle. The initial panic was replaced by a gnawing, desperate fear. Lily and Leo, their faces gaunt and their eyes wide with fear, had stopped asking questions. They just stared at the walls, their silence more terrifying than any scream. Mark and Sarah tried to call friends and family in other states, hoping for a different outcome, but the story was the same. Their friends in Chicago reported a similar incident on a freeway. Their cousins in Boston were experiencing the same toxic air, and their grandparents in Miami had been told to shelter in place due to a mysterious spill. Everyone, it seemed, was in the same terrifying situation. The food was gone. The water was running low. A week turned into 10 days. A gnawing hunger began to take hold. Mark looked at his wife and children, their faces pale and their eyes hollow. They were trapped, too afraid to go outside. The family huddled in the living room, the darkness of night having settled in. They were a tableau of desperation, their silhouettes cast in the faint glow of the television screen, which now showed a static image and an emergency tone. Mark held Sarah's hand, his thumb rubbing circles on her skin, a small, futile attempt at comfort. "We have to do something," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "We can't just sit here and wait to die." Mark didn't respond immediately. The words hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. He looked at his children, their small forms curled up on the couch, their breathing shallow. His heart ached with a pain so profound it felt physical. "What if?" Lily's small voice broke the silence. "What if we just open the door?" "No, honey," Sarah said instantly, her voice sharper than she intended. "We can't. The air is bad." "But we're hungry," Leo said, his voice a barely audible whimper. "And what about Mr. Henderson? He's still there. What if he's not?" "Gone." Mark looked at Sarah. The same thought had been haunting him for days. The news, the internet, the text messages, they all said the same thing. But what if it was all wrong? What if the motionless people outside were just a side effect? What if they weren't dead? What if they were just unconscious, and by staying inside they were condemning themselves to a slow, agonizing death from starvation? He looked at the window, at the still, dark forms on the street, and then back at his children. The choice was a terrifying one, and it was a choice he couldn't make alone. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit high-tech control room, a man in a perfectly tailored suit sipped from a mug of coffee. Dozens of monitors in front of him showed feeds from all over the world. One screen showed Mark's living room, with the family huddled together on the couch, their faces gaunt with hunger and fear. Another showed the still figures in hazmat suits on a deserted street, and another showed a news broadcast, the anchor's faces a mask of grave concern. The man watched the scene unfold with an impassive expression, then turned to a colleague. "Did you see that?" he asked, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "The family is still in there. They're on day 10. Their food is gone." His colleague, a heavy woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, nodded. "The AI system is working flawlessly. The drone projections are extremely realistic and holding up very well. The voice matching is nearly perfect. People really think they are talking to their friends and family. We've had a 99.7% compliance rate so far. People are perfectly convinced." The man took another sip of his coffee. He looked back at the screen showing Mark and his family, their faces a portrait of utter despair. "It's remarkable," he said, shaking his head slightly. "With technology like this, how easy it is to manipulate an entire population. They're dying in there, too afraid to open the door, and they have no idea they're starving themselves for a lie." The woman nodded in agreement, her eyes fixed on the screen, a small smile on her face. "It's a brave new world," she said with a slight laugh.